1. Evolution by natural selection. Evolution by natural selection is a core concept of biology that explains how species change over time. Developed by Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace, this theory is often summed up by the phrase, survival of the fittest. Here's what that really means. In nature, organisms, such as plants and animals, vary in their traits, like their size, speed, and ability to gather resources. Some of these traits are hereditary, passed from parents to offspring. In any given environment, certain traits become advantageous, helping the organism to survive and reproduce. For example, a bird whose beak shape lets it access food that others can't will have a better chance of surviving when food is scarce. Over time, the traits that help organisms survive and reproduce tend to increase in the population because those with these traits are more likely to have offspring. This process of natural selection means that species gradually change. They may develop new characteristics or lose those no longer useful. This theory profoundly impacts our understanding of life on Earth, showing that species are not unchanging but are dynamic and constantly adapting to their environments. It's a beautiful demonstration of nature's complexity and interconnectedness. Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love. 2. Cell theory. The cell theory is a fundamental principle of biology, stating that all living organisms are composed of cells, and the cell is the basic unit of life. This theory was developed in the mid-19th century by scientists Matthias Schleiden, Theodor Schwann, and Rudolf Virchow. Cells are not just the building blocks of plants and animals, they are also the building blocks of function. Every process that sustains life is carried out within cells. Photosynthesis, respiration, and digestion all occur within cellular structures. Moreover, the theory highlights that all cells arise from pre-existing cells, emphasizing the continuity of life. This idea refuted the earlier notion of spontaneous generation, which suggested life could emerge from non-living matter. Understanding cell theory helps us grasp more complex biological concepts, like genetic diseases, stem cell behavior, and the mechanics of cancer. It reinforces that looking at the smallest units can provide insights into the whole organism, linking microscopic cellular events to the macroscopic world. 3. Germ theory of disease. The germ theory of disease revolutionized medical science by establishing that many diseases are caused by microorganisms, such as bacteria and viruses. This theory was developed by scientists like Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch in the 19th century. Before germ theory, many believed in miasma theory, where diseases were thought to be caused by bad air and imbalances in bodily humors. Germ theory shifted this perspective dramatically, showing that specific, identifiable pathogens invade the body, reproduce, and cause disease. This understanding led to the development of modern hygiene practices, sterilization techniques, and antibiotics. It also changed medical treatment from a more speculative practice to one based on empirical evidence and targeted interventions. Knowing that germs cause diseases allows doctors to prevent infections by sterilizing surgical equipment, washing hands, and using vaccines to prepare the immune system against these invaders. The theory not only saves millions of lives through these medical practices but also underscores the importance of scientific research in uncovering truths that can profoundly change our approach to health and disease. 4. Genetics and the laws of inheritance. Gregor Mendel, a 19th-century monk, founded modern genetics with his experiments on pea plants. He discovered the fundamental laws of inheritance, which explain how traits are passed from parents to offspring through genes. Mendel's work revealed that traits are inherited as discrete units, now known as genes, rather than blending together from both parents. He formulated the law of segregation and the law of independent assortment. The law of segregation states that each organism carries 2 alleles for each trait, and these alleles separate during reproduction, giving just 1 allele to each offspring. The law of independent assortment states that alleles of different traits are passed to offspring independently of each other. These principles form the basis for understanding genetic diversity and the prediction of genetic outcomes, which are crucial in fields ranging from medicine to agriculture. Mendel's insights opened the door to linking diseases to specific genetic causes and paved the way for modern genetic engineering and gene therapy, changing how we approach everything from breeding plants to treating genetic disorders. 5. Theory of gene regulation. The theory of gene regulation explains how cells control the expression of their genes to ensure that the right proteins are made at the right times. This regulation is crucial because it allows cells to respond adaptively to their changing environments and to differentiate during development. Gene regulation involves mechanisms that enhance or inhibit the transcription of genes into messenger RNA and their translation into proteins. For example, in bacteria, the lac operon model illustrates how cells can turn genes on and off in response to the presence or absence of lactose. In eukaryotic cells, things are more complex, involving transcription factors, enhancers, silencers, and epigenetic modifications like DNA methylation and histone modification. Understanding gene regulation has profound implications. It helps explain how a single fertilized egg can develop into a complex organism with diverse types of cells, all containing the same DNA. It also sheds light on how dysfunctional gene regulation can lead to diseases like cancer, where regulatory mechanisms fail, leading cells to proliferate uncontrollably. This theory underscores the dynamic and responsive nature of living systems, illustrating how life is programmed yet adaptable, intricate yet robust. 6. Endosymbiotic Theory. The endosymbiotic theory, proposed by Lynn Margulis in the 1960s, explains how complex cells, eukaryotic cells, evolved from simpler ones, prokaryotic cells. According to this theory, the organelles within eukaryotic cells, such as mitochondria and chloroplasts, were once independent prokaryotic organisms that began living inside larger cells, in a mutually beneficial relationship. Mitochondria, for example, are believed to have been once free-living bacteria that specialized in energy production. They entered into a symbiotic relationship with a larger cell, providing it with energy in exchange for a stable environment and nutrients. Over time, these bacteria became an integral part of the cell, evolving into mitochondria. This theory not only highlights the cooperative aspects of evolution but also explains the presence of two membranes around mitochondria and chloroplasts and why these organelles have their own DNA, separate from the cell's nuclear DNA. Understanding endosymbiosis helps elucidate the origins of complex life forms, demonstrating how life evolves not just through competition but also through cooperation and interdependence, providing a broader view of the evolutionary processes. 7. Ecological Equilibrium Theory. Ecological equilibrium theory discusses the stability and sustainability of ecosystems. It posits that ecosystems can reach a state of balance, or equilibrium, where species populations remain relatively stable, supported by their interactions and the available resources. This equilibrium is dynamic, meaning it isn't static or unchanging but rather involves constant adjustments and feedback loops among organisms and their environment. For example, predator-prey relationships demonstrate this dynamic balance. A rise in prey population might lead to an increase in predators, which in turn reduces the prey population, eventually leading to a decrease in predators, and so the cycle continues. Disturbances such as natural disasters, human interventions, or invasive species can push ecosystems out of equilibrium. However, resilient ecosystems can recover, returning to a state where different species coexist sustainably. Understanding ecological equilibrium is crucial for conservation efforts and resource management. It helps in predicting how ecosystems respond to changes, guiding actions to restore damaged ecosystems, and managing them sustainably to ensure biodiversity and the services they provide to humanity and the planet. 8. Continental drift and biogeography. Continental drift is the movement of the Earth's continents relative to each other. Biogeography is the study of the distribution of species and ecosystems across geographic spaces and through geological times. The theory of continental drift has significantly impacted biogeography by explaining the historical and geographical reasons behind the distribution of species. Proposed by Alfred Wegener in the early 20th century, continental drift suggests that continents were once joined in a single landmass called Pangaea, which later split and drifted apart. This movement led to isolation and different evolutionary paths for species on different continents, explaining why similar environments on different continents can be home to biologically diverse species. This theory also helps explain the presence of similar fossils in geographically distant regions and the peculiar distribution of certain plant and animal groups, which only makes sense in light of the continents' past connections. In modern times, understanding this concept is crucial for predicting the effects of current climate change on species distribution, aiding in conservation planning, and restoring ecosystems that are resilient to environmental changes. 9. Allopatric speciation. Allopatric speciation is one of the primary mechanisms by which new species arise. This process occurs when a population is geographically divided into two or more isolated groups that cannot interbreed. Over time, genetic differences accumulate between these isolated populations due to natural selection, genetic drift, and mutation, eventually leading to the emergence of distinct species. Imagine a single species of bird living on a mountain range. If an earthquake splits the mountain into separate islands, each bird population will adapt to its new environment independently. Different food sources, climates, or predators on these islands might favor different traits, leading to divergent evolutionary paths for each isolated group. Allopatric speciation is significant because it highlights how geographical barriers can lead to biodiversity. It is a critical concept in conservation biology, as it explains the importance of habitat connectivity and the impact of human activities like deforestation and urbanization, which can fragment habitats and force this kind of speciation. Understanding this process helps scientists predict and manage the impacts of environmental changes on species diversity and guide strategies to preserve the genetic diversity critical for species adaptability to changing environments. 10. Sexual selection. Sexual selection is a form of natural selection where certain traits increase an individual's chances of mating and thus passing on those traits to offspring. This theory, initially proposed by Charles Darwin, explains why some species exhibit traits that might be detrimental in terms of survival but advantageous in terms of reproduction. There are two main types of sexual selection: intersexual selection, where individuals of one sex choose mates based on certain desirable traits, like peacock's tails, and intrasexual selection, where individuals of the same sex compete for access to mates, like the antlers of male deer used in fights. Sexual selection leads to the development of secondary sexual characteristics, which can be extreme and sometimes bizarre. These characteristics can include elaborate coloration, complex mating dances, or structures used in combat. While these features might make an individual more vulnerable to predators or other environmental pressures, their benefits in terms of attracting mates and producing offspring outweigh these risks. This theory enriches our understanding of how evolutionary forces shape not just survival but also reproductive strategies, influencing the behavioral ecology and morphology of species in a profound way. 11. Kin selection theory. Kin selection theory is a cornerstone of evolutionary biology, explaining how behaviors that seem altruistic can evolve through the natural selection process. Proposed by W.D. Hamilton, it suggests that individuals can pass on their genes not only through direct reproduction but also by helping relatives who share many of the same genes. The concept is encapsulated in Hamilton's rule, which states that an altruistic behavior will be favored by natural selection if the cost of the behavior to the altruist is less than the benefit to the recipient, discounted by the degree of genetic relatedness between the two. This means that organisms are more likely to perform self-sacrificing behaviors for close relatives than for distant relatives or non-relatives. For instance, in some species of social insects like bees and ants, workers are often sterile and devote their lives to helping their mother, the queen, reproduce. This behavior makes sense through the lens of kin selection because the workers are ensuring that their mother's genes, which they share, are passed on to the next generation. Understanding kin selection is crucial for studying social behaviors in animals, including humans. It provides insights into the evolutionary origins of complex social behaviors and helps explain why animals might act in ways that benefit others at a cost to themselves. 12. Punctuated equilibrium. Punctuated equilibrium is a theory in evolutionary biology which proposes that most species will experience little net evolutionary change for most of their geological history, remaining in an equilibrium state. This stasis is punctuated by brief periods of rapid change during which species undergo significant evolutionary transformations, often associated with a split in lineages. Proposed by Stephen Jay Gould and Niles Eldredge in 1972, this theory challenged the traditional view of gradualism, which held that evolutionary changes occur slowly and steadily over time. Instead, punctuated equilibrium suggests that evolutionary changes are concentrated in rare, geologically rapid events of branching speciation, followed by long intervals of morphological stability. This pattern can often be seen in the fossil record, where species appear suddenly and then remain relatively unchanged until they disappear or evolve into something markedly different. The theory has provided a plausible explanation for the gaps seen in the fossil records and has influenced how paleontologists interpret evolutionary changes. Punctuated equilibrium emphasizes the importance of sudden environmental changes and geographic isolation in the creation of new species and highlights the complexity of the evolutionary landscape, which is not always a smooth and continuous process.